Hi, this is Gary, and today I want to talk about something that affects a lot of people, but especially those of us with physical and intellectual disabilities and their families, caregivers, and whatnot. And that is inequality, financial, monetary inequality, which has reached record levels that have been unseen before in history. And the reason that's important because the majority of physically and intellectually disabled children and adults live in low income families. And as a consequence, we have to deal with this inequality at a level that is different from those that are fortunate enough to be in upper middle class to wealthy families. And even they're going to be affected by this to some extent. And so, what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain how the fiat money system works, how it creates this wealth inequality, why it is historically so extreme, and that previous eras couldn't have this sort of extreme, how it affects us disabled people, and I'm going to talk about an alternative possibility called Bitcoin, and how and why that could be the answer that we've been looking for all these years. So let's begin. The fiat money system is a complicated thing, but essentially the word fiat means by decree, by command. And what this means in relationship to money is that the Federal Reserve, which is the head of the whole monetary banking system that we have now, worldwide, it controls the vast majority of it. And what it has the privilege of doing is to create as much money as possible. I mean, it's infinity. It grows thanks to Richard Nixon and the what we call the Nixon shock back in 1971. It is no longer connected to gold in any way, shape, or form. And what this allows the bankers to do is to create money to infinity. So here's what I like to describe the monetary system. We're going to say that 1971, the monetary system, the amount of money, the money supply that is a 12-inch, that is 1 foot square pizza, like your pan pizzas. And that each person's allotment is represented by a 2-inch square. Now, I know that's really oversimplified, but this gives you an idea. This will help explain it. And so what's happening over time is that as the money supply increases, the size of the pizza increases. So that today we have what might be considered maybe a 12-foot pizza. Your that 2-inch square is still the same, and that represents the dollar. And so what happens is that that dollar becomes less and less valuable. It represents less and less of the whole. And that gives you the phenomenon of purchasing power. And businesses have to deal with the same thing that individuals do. So, so you end up with this ever expanding pizza, and yet the size of the individual pieces, that is the dollar, or any of your units of the dollar, like your quarters, your dimes, what have you, are going to be exactly the same. It's not as worth as much. It's not the same relationship to the whole of the monetary system. And so it takes more of those 2-inch pizza pieces to be the equivalent of what it was in 1971 when it was a foot. When the pizza was a foot instead of 10, 20 feet, what it is now. I mean, pick your favorite number. And so what that does is it means that parents have to work harder. They can't stay at home and raise their children. The equipment that is needed, the price keeps going up because uh, it costs businesses for the materials, for the labor and stuff. That price keeps going up too because the labor costs, they have to keep up with the rate of inflation. And as that rate of inflation, the size of the pizza gets bigger, 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 it can't cover it. So so you have this ability of the super rich to keep getting richer. And the reason why this is not only the actual inflation of the monetary supply, the number of dollars, but also what is called the Cantillon effect, which is named after a Irish economist named Richard Cantillon. I don't remember the dates, but it's like the late 1600s, early 1700s, that mid 1700s that he lived. Well, this is a long time ago, and he found that the people that were closest to the money printers, because they had money printers too, because the Bank of England was the first one to start using paper to represent gold, because gold costs a lot to transfer to settle the transactions. And so what you did is you had all these bankers, like the Bank of England, starting to use credit. And that's what a fiat system is also a credit system. And so those that are closest to the money printer, those who already have the wealth, are considered more worthy, more trustworthy. Therefore, as they print more and more, and the pizza gets bigger and bigger, they get more and more of the pizza. You still get the same little tiny piece that you've always gotten. Maybe it's got maybe from 2 inches to maybe 4 inches, but I mean, considering how big the piece is getting, it doesn't mean much. I mean, the size of that dollar is still the same, but maybe you're getting 3 or 4 flight pieces, 2 inch pieces to represent what the 2 inch used to do. Anyway, you get the idea. So that's how this wealth inequality can go to the stratosphere. I mean, to the limits, because they keep doing this. And yet we have some periods of contraction. I listened to a podcast the other day. And it was a clubhouse thing, and it was mentioning that the money supply's actually been shrinking a little bit thanks to the quantitative tightening. But when you compare it to the long term, when you zoom out, the inflation just keeps getting bigger. The money supply has gotten way big. So now, what's the solution to this? What's the solution? Well, that's Bitcoin. And I'll explain why. And there's a couple reasons why your purchasing power when you're on the Bitcoin standard will grow. It's going to take a longer time than the stuff I was talking about last week. But it will and can and will happen. And here's how it works. For one, as more and more people realize that Bitcoin is valuable because it has only 21 million Bitcoin that will ever be made, we may actually create smaller pieces and divide up that Bitcoin into smaller and smaller chunks. But as of right now, there's 100 million Satoshis in a big single Bitcoin. And that's all there's going to be. That number of Satoshis will still be the same. We may divide it into sub-Satoshis. And this might not happen till 2110 or something, or later. I don't see it happening anytime soon. And it'll be done by consensus. So it's not going to be a government decreeing it, but it will be, the whole of the world will say, of the miners and the node operators are going to say, yeah, this is what we want. This is the right thing to do. So, how does the purchasing power increase? Well, it increases by, like I say, one, by more and more people thinking it's valuable, and they purchase the limited amount. And it's growing. I should kind of backtrack a little bit and say it's growing, but at a decreasingly smaller and smaller amount. And we have what is called the halving, or a halving cycle. And this happens roughly every 4 years. It's based on the number of blocks that are mined. And I don't know, I don't remember the exact number, but the next halving is set, it's believed will occur at about April of 2024. And each block is mined roughly on average every 10 minutes, and it's adjusted every 2 weeks through the difficulty adjustments, which is for another discussion. But that kept at an average of every 10 minutes. So, right now, the number of bitcoins that were awarded to the miners for a new block is 6.5 Bitcoin. And that's going to have, that comes down to 900 Bitcoin a day is being created. So in 2024, after April of 2024, it will be down to 450 Bitcoin a day. Then in 2028, when the next halving occurs, it's going to be 221 Bitcoin a day. So it gives you an idea. It's going to just keep decreasing. And give me 225, give it 225, from 450 to 225 in 2028. And so that continues until they believe the last Satoshi will be mined somewhere in 2140. So what you have going is you have that is small, it's going to get smaller the rate. So as more and more people start using it, as more and more 8 billion people start using Bitcoin and owning Bitcoin, it's going to become more valuable. First, because more and more people are going to see that it holds that value and it's worth holding on to. And as that happens, the US dollar to Bitcoin conversion rate will go more and more favor to the Bitcoin. The number of dollars that you can get per Bitcoin is going to increase because of the conversion rate. So when in maybe 5 years from now, when Bitcoin is a couple hundred or $500,000 of Bitcoin, just to really get, it's going to be worth more in dollar terms than it is today at roughly 30,000, and that just means the conversion rate has changed. On a second level, your purchasing power increases even if you're in a community, a city, a town, a company, a family, a country, a region that uses only Bitcoin. By 2030, I expect that to be the case. There'll be a lot of places that they're only going to take Bitcoin. They're not going to put up with the dollar or any of the fiat currencies for that matter. And in those cases, your Bitcoin increases in value. Your purchasing power value increases because more and more people are trying to use that quantity of Bitcoin that is only being added to only so much. And it decreased every 4 years the amount of Bitcoin that is being added. And what this does is it means that if you save money for something like a CCTV for a legally blind child, save up for a wheelchair, or save up for a special type of education or equipment, or just a little home for your child, you'll be able to save and it will accrue value. It's not going to lose value, for sure. And in fact, it will get more valuable over time. And as a result, it's going to allow families to work, provide for their families, unless they have one or two children or adults that are not capable of working, or the community doesn't want them to work because, it might make them look bad or something, whatever. It's not going to be a problem. Now it is a problem. You got to take government handouts, tons of government programs for this and that, and you got to find them. You got to qualify for them. You got to do whatever they want to do it. With Bitcoin and with saving, real saving, you actually get the power to choose what's appropriate. You don't have to kowtow to any government. for the purpose of saving, for the purpose of acquiring um, the things you need. There's a couple other things that I'm just learning about um, that will have an impact on disabled people and people in general, those that are capable of maybe having their own business or something. But I'm gonna save that for another video, so this isn't too long. And so just keep in mind that the very real power of savings and the increased purchasing power that Bitcoin will enable people to have will positively affect disabled people. No more waiting, hoping that a government, in the US we have Social Security and SSI are the two most common monetary handout for disabled children and adults. And there's an annual cost of living adjustment. In other words, it's an inflation adjustment. It usually doesn't come to all that much. And with the rate of inflation increasing the way it has, it's not going to keep up pace. We'll see how inflation goes by the end of the year because it's done on an annual basis. Um, but it's something to consider. You don't have to deal with that. And you don't have to wonder because this is just remarkable. It'll take time to get your heads around it, but for those with physical and intellectual disabilities, this is another group of people that will benefit from it. Once we can get the technology to where it's accessible, like say for people blind and disabled. Although Blue Wallet I can work with and I can't work with my credit union's phone app. Go figure. But that is what it is. So for now, enjoy this video. I hopefully will have other video outs kind of showing how physically and intellectually disabled children and adults can benefit from the Bitcoin revolution and how the economics, it's important for at least one member of an extended family to be studying this so that they understand what's happening. Because we're in a monumental transition. So with that in mind, bye for now and have yourself a wonderful day.